Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to Cosmic Blueprints. We are going to finish up with the month of Cheshvan. We started with the month of Kislev, which means we started sometime in November of this series. And we've already gone through, this is going to be our 14th class together. And we're going to finish the mazalot. We're not finished with this topic, of course. Studying the Zodiac, understanding the months themselves is a very deep, long, intense conversation to have. And all I'm trying to do is hopefully whet your appetite and spend more time in doing more research based on the things that I provided for you. Now remember, each month has a particular spiritual signature that it is expressing. And that while we speak about how there are certain traits that are more prevalent in particular types of months, just be mindful that the month and the traits that are associated with it. So, for example, Scorpio, Cheshvan, it has particular types of traits. Some of them are less desirable than others, right? Some people are born with better traits than others. But remember, you're never defined by your traits. We say, En mazal Yisrael, that there is no final mazal for any single one individual. Why? Because you have the power breaking out of your mazal. As a matter of fact, and I think we spoke about this before, we know that there are a bunch of different types of attributes that are based on the Sefirot, on the mystical concepts of how God flows energy from above to below. We talk about Chokhmah Bin Adat as being the crown, the Keter, the idea of the higher consciousness, Chokhmah, the power of asking questions, Koachmah, Bina is the Vin Davar Mitoch Davar, to be able to extrapolate information from the world around you. Da'at is the application of knowledge. Then you have something called Chesed, which is the right arm. Chesed is kindness. The stronger arm is the arm that has to go ahead and be the one that's involved in engaging the world and doing kindness to the world. The left hand, which is justice, which is deen, is the weaker arm, and that's when you're going ahead and you're pushing people away or you're doing justice. Use the weaker arm, don't be using the stronger arm. You want to push people away with your left arm, not your stronger arm. Your right arm, you want to bring them closer to you with your right arm. The right leg is called Netzach, right, which is the eternity or infinite, right, eternal. Then you have the left leg, which is Hod, right? Moshe and Aaron are the right and left leg. In Judaism, the legs are considered to be one system. You can lose an arm, but you still have functionality of an arm. If you lose the leg, the functions of the legs can no longer serve their function. You can't hop around. You can no longer walk. So there's something unique about the legs as being a system. So Netzach and Hod go together. Then you have something called Yesod and Malchut. Yesod means, the secret or foundation, right? And Malchut means kingdom. So at the end of the system, you have a kingdom. Now, what kingdom are you trying to build? And the answer is the kingdom of the self. Malchut, the kingdom that each of us are trying to express in this world, is our ability to govern over ourselves. Remember, the greatest gift that God gave you is free will, right? And therefore, God's free will tells me something unique about our story. It tells me that He loves you so deeply because He wants you to be the best you that you can be. You're each born with a preset of a predisposition to certain types of traits. Some of it was imparted to you on your mazal, the day that you were born. Some of it was imparted to you by your parents and their upbringing, and some of it was imparted to you based on the generation that you find yourselves in right now, okay? But irrespective of what you inherited, what Judaism wants is for you to recognize you have the ability of breaking out. Think about Abraham, our patriarch. Abraham Avinu, his father was an idol worshiper, Terach. He tried having his son arrested and killed. Okay, he had to run away from his home and his house, his birthplace, and all of his friends and family, and leave it all behind. The whole entire world told him that he was nuts. There was no textbooks to read. There was no support anywhere on the planet. He was completely alone, and somehow he had to find the strength of breaking away from the world that he came from and the philosophies that he inherited and become his own person. That stubborn nature of a Jew that is looking for truth, that is endowed with the power of rewriting his own software, rewriting or re-envisioning what his or her future looks like is what it means to be Jewish at the core. The Torah itself is the guidebook that allows you to live a life that expresses your fullest potential. That's what it's there for. It's there to challenge you. It's there to give you the perfect amount of counterweight so you can be the best you that you can be. That's what the Zodiac studies are about. Remember, we started with talking about how all the Rishonim, all the early rabbis were experts in the Zodiac signs. They were experts in understanding the stars and the constellation and how they fell out. Why? Because they believed that if you looked out into the sky and you understood the mechanics of how the universe functions, you'd have a deeper appreciation of how God functions. And therefore, there is a flow of time. There's a cyclical nature of time that you find in weeks and months. Every single Sunday is a repetition of the Sunday before it. Every single Rosh Chodesh is a representation or re-experiencing of that particular month. Okay? We're constantly in a loop. And therefore, there are specific signatures of spirituality that are expressed in these days and months that you and I could tap into. If you know, for example, that Mar Cheshvan, right, the month of Cheshvan itself is a dark month, the beginning of the winter, and that the physical world is an expression of what's happening on a spiritual plane. And therefore, if the physical world is going through a type of darkness, then the spiritual realm is going through a kind of darkness or withdrawal, if you will, right? That's important. Because if I know that the world around me is going through darkness, then what's my avodah? What's my job? My job is to be able to push back and figure out how I'm going to bring more light into this world of darkness, right? Therefore, if you see, like, the conversations we've been having are, yes, we're talking about the Zodiac and the influence of the Zodiac on the personality, but for me, that's irrelevant. The purpose of the conversation that we've had up until now is really a discussion about understanding your own nature, being aware of what it means to be you, and clarifying that. And then asking, I would say, the most bold question is, well, who do you want to be? We said last week, we spoke about the month of Nisan, right? The month of Nisan, this Saturday night is Rosh Chodesh Nisan. The month of Nisan, every single month has a particular pasuk that is associated with it. And this pasuk has a different combination of God's four-letter name, right? So the pasuk is Yismach Hashem, Yismechu Hashem, V'tegel Haaretz, right? God, Yismechu Hashemayim, so Yismechu Hashemayim, V'tegel Haaretz, right? That the heavens will rejoice in simcha, and the earth will have its joy. And there are two things. That's Yud, Yismechu Hashemayim, Yud Hey, V'tegel, the Vav, Haaretz, Hey. Yud Hey Vav Hey. You see God's name expressed. And this expression of God's name is not an accident. The Yud Hey Vav Hey is a representation of the following. The Yud in the Hebrew language always represents masculine, of a higher form. The Yud is a floating letter that is above the line, so to speak, and therefore the Yud represents spirituality coming from above. Whereas the Vav is also a masculine letter, and that's expressing spirituality that is coming from below. Right? The two Hes represent femininity. One is a feminine that is from a higher femininity, and one's a lower femininity. Now remember that in Judaism, the idea of masculine and feminine is not unique to any one gender. Each of us have elements of masculinity and femininity in us. As a matter of fact, when we talk about the act of giving, right, the act of giving is masculine. That doesn't mean that women can't give. It means that when women are givers, they're exercising their masculine muscle. And when men become receivers, right, you're exercising your feminine muscles, right? So when a woman is nursing, right, that is a masculine act, which is like a weird thing to think about because I can't think of anything more feminine than nursing, right? But the act of giving itself is a masculine power. God is masculine. The Jewish people are feminine. But the Jewish people can be in express masculinity when we're in a giving state. What's unique about the month of Nisan is that the energy comes from above to below. Yismechu Hashemayim, right? The heavens are stirred up and they're creating this energy of simcha, which is higher than the tegel haaretz. Tegel is just joy. It's a lower level of simcha, okay? So you have this something from above coming below, and then the below impacting that which comes from above. Okay?
You know, because there are two-letter hays in the permutation of the name of Hashem.
Yes.
How do we know which one is the upper hay?
Well, it depends what comes from before, what comes before and after. The Yud or the Vav will determine which one it is. Right? So sometimes, it depends. So whenever is touching that masculine letter will determine which it is. The hay is always feminine, but the letter, the Yud or the Vav, will determine how that interaction is working. Right? Is it a higher femininity or a lower femininity? Both the Yud and the Vav are both masculine. Right?
So it depends whichever is the
Correct.
Yud, where the Vav
Correct. All right, anyway, good question. Pleasure. First of all, whoever gave me this tea over here, thank you so much. God bless you.
And by the way, also, Rabbi, because it's the month of Nisan,
Yes.
Rosh Chodesh, is very important because the first 12 days is equivalent to which month?
Correct, that's right. They say that the first month of Rosh Chodesh, the month of Rosh Chodesh Nisan, is the beginning of all creation. And therefore, in the beginning of this month, you have the potential of all of creation. And there's something unique about the month of Nisan and being able to create everything. So there are those that will say you do that, you do the 12. There's special Tehillim that's recited for the first day of first 12 days of Nisan. But I would say more importantly, while that's important, I think it's equally important to remind you all that in the month of Nisan, there is a special mitzvah of Birkat HaIlanot, of making a blessing on the trees. And now most people, or women, don't really feel obligated because they think it's a mitzvah taseh shazman gerama. It's a time-bound mitzvah, and therefore women are not obligated to it. But this is a mistake. Women are obligated to make a birkat ha'ilanot in the same way that men are. But it only happens on Nisan. No. If we lived in a time where the spring would create a reality where trees are always budding, then the mitzvah would always be around. So, for example, we have the mitzvah of bikurim and bringing first fruits. The only reason why we do that in the month of Nisan is because that's when the fruits are. The month of Tishrei is that's when they're available. So we make the bracha at a time where it's available, and therefore women have an obligation to do this. Now, if you want more motivation to do the mitzvah of Birkat HaIlanot, there's two things you should know. One is Manhattan. You're like, where am I going to find a fruit tree?
Yeah, exactly.
And
On 75th and Riverside.
What's that?
On 75th and Riverside.
Okay, that's so. Now let's say you.
They have a sign with the bracha on it.
Oh, really? So I don't know if you know this, but New York City, if you actually Google New York City trees, there's a website that New York City put up with all the trees in and around New York City, and they're all listed. And they'll tell you where there are fruit trees in Central Park, in and around Park Avenue, and so on and so forth. There's actually a list that the city provides you for all the trees. Okay? So you go there, you make the bracha. Now, part of the kavanah is two things. One is that, we spoke about this, and I guess this is kind of like tied into Cheshvan, which is that we say, Ki adam etz pri hasadeh, man is like the tree of the field, right? So in the same way that trees have seasons, people have seasons. In the same way that trees, like in the month of Cheshvan, lose their leaves, and they don't have their fruit, and they feel barren and alone, right? There are times where we're empty, and then there are times where we're full. And right now, as we're moving into the spring months, the spring and the summer months, the times of light, these next 6 months are masculine in their nature, and there's a tremendous amount of power of shefa coming down. So when we go to the tree, we're supposed to be reminded of the fact that in the same way this tree is reblooming, and is becoming alive again, and is becoming in its expansive state, I too am going through a transformation. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but in the same way the physical world is expressing a concept of growth and transformation, you are too. Now how you tap into that, that's on you. But right, so if the outside world is growing and changing, then the question is, well, how am I growing and changing? Because it's happening whether you like it or not. You don't want it to be via circumstance, you want it to be via choice. Okay? So that's number one. Number two is that the Mikubalim, according to the Zohar, that when you make the blessing on the tree, right, this fruit-bearing tree, you're also empowering the souls that are reincarnated into the earth, in the trees and the fruits, to have the ability of detaching themselves from this earthly plane. So the blessing itself isn't just a blessing of being grateful for seeing the world come into its newest bloom, but it's also on a higher spiritual plane, allowing those souls to finally be free, and you could be involved in that big mitzvah. Okay, fine. So that's for the month of Nisan. The month of Nisan is the month of miracles. It is the month of Geula, the month of transformation, and like all things, the idea of Malchut at the end of that system of the Sefirot is really for you to establish your own kingdom. You establish your own kingdom by creating a vision of what it means to be the best version of yourselves. Okay, we have a pasuk over here in Malachim. It says, "B'shana achat ha'asara b'yerach bul hu hachodesh hashmini." The 8th month is month of Cheshvan. Okay, so look at the Midrash. The Midrash says as follows: the third temple. This is where you see, by the way, the month of Cheshvan mentioned in the Tanakh itself. Okay, so it's not mentioned in the Torah. The reason why it's called, some people call the month of Cheshvan Mar Cheshvan, the bitter Cheshvan, and you'll see shortly, is because we know that's the month that the flood happened in. The month of Cheshvan is where the floods, waters came in, the world was destroyed. It is also a bitter month because there are no holidays in the month of Cheshvan, so we call it the bitter month. So Midrash says as follows: the third temple will be dedicated during this month. Okay, some positive news. Just as the tabernacle was completed during the month of Kislev, and its dedication was 4 months later during Nisan, and the temple of Solomon was completed during the Cheshvan, and its dedication was 11 months later in Tishrei. The third temple may be rebuilt soon, amen, will be dedicated during Cheshvan. The future third temple is symbolized in the Hebrew word for the sign of Scorpio, akrab, which spells the word ikar bet, the essential house, or the ikar bayit. Okay, which will never be destroyed. We see that one of the things you'll notice in Sukkot, we read Harachaman hu yakim lanu Sukkat David hanofelet. Right, may the merciful one reestablish the King David's tent that fell. Right, so the Maharal asks, well, why does it say Harachaman hu yakim lanu at Sukkat David hanofelet? Why you gotta tell me David's sukkah? That's the tent. Let's say David's Beit HaMikdash or David's Bayit. And so the Maharal has this great answer. He says that the reason why we talk about reestablishing David's tent is because when a tent falls and it's reestablished, it's different than when a house falls. When a tent falls and when you put it back up, it's exactly the same structure it was before. But when a house is destroyed and you rebuild it, it's something completely new. We don't want a new house. We want the old house to be renewed. That's why it's Sukkat David Hanofelet. I gotta make a bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihya b'dvaro.
Usually it's Sukkot Shlomo.
It says Sukkat David Hanofelet. You sing it on Sukkot. Harachaman hu yakim lanu Sukkat David Hanofelet. There is other pasukim that talk about Shlomo, but on Sukkot we talk about the reestablishment of that. That is the beginning of the rainy season. We start praying for rain in Sukkot, and that leads us into the month of Cheshvan. So Yalkut Shimoni says as follows: the Mabul, the flood of Noah's generation, began during this month. The fact that the letter Mem of Mabul is missing in the month's name is explained by saying that Bul actually means flood, right? And the letter Mem preceding it, containing the numerical value of 40, indicates that the flood lasted for 40 days, lasting from the 17th of Mar Cheshvan until the 27th of Kislev. Each year following the flood, the world felt the residual catastrophic effects of the flood, and the people were in a state of panic. However, the dedication of the Temple of Solomon during Cheshvan, these residual catastrophes ceased. The flood is also hinted in the word of Akrab, Scorpio, in that the scorpion's bite inevitably is oker, bet, destroys the house. So there's this deep correlation between this concept of this destruction in the month itself, but there's also a sense of renewal as well. It's important to note that actually, if you look closer at the story of Genesis and you read about the people and their names and their lives, right? You'll see that these people lived extraordinarily long lives. So there's two ways of understanding that. One is that people back then lived really long time, or these were unique individuals that were being mentioned historically because they lived very long. And then after the Mabul, after the flood, you start seeing that people's lives are shortened. You talk about people living 600 years, 700, 900 years, and then after the flood, people are dying at 175 and going all the way down to 120 with Moses. You see a decline in their years alive. So the Ramban Nachmanides, who was a doctor from Spain, says that 14th century. He says that the reason why there's a decline in people's longevity after the flood is because the flood itself changed the physical nature of the world that we lived in. He said specifically there was a degradation of air quality after the flood. And that degradation of air quality weakened humanity, and we no longer had the nutrients to live as long as we did before. That wasn't only a weakening of the air quality, but the weakening of the air quality impacted the fruits, the vegetation, the animals, everything, and therefore everything became degraded. And because the environment was degraded, our lifespan was degraded.
Wow.
Yeah,
But
fascinating.
Rabbi, also, I've been to India, the Himalayan mountains. So I see, when there's a avalanche, there are huge slabs of stone, which are polished stone, and it like sticking out. I said, how is it possible that this kind of stone would go up high in the mountain, 11 meters, above
Yeah.
the sea level? So is it possible that there's a change that the high place?
Yeah, there is. That's exactly what the Midrash says. I'm actually doing a series on Monday nights for the singles. We're going through the 974 generations before creation. And one of the Midrashim says that actually. I have, if you remember Hurricane Sandy, it wasn't too long ago. So my office was on Ocean Parkway in Neptune. So it was in the Brighton Beach area. And so after Hurricane Sandy, I was very involved in helping, bring volunteers to help people with their homes and move things out, to drain their homes from all the water and fish that came in from the ocean. And the thing that I found so striking was that there are these massive boulders that are on Brighton Beach that were lifted up and thrown onto the homes because of the waves and the water were so strong. So water can do anything. We don't understand how catastrophic the Mabul was,
And the Himalayan sea salt, and it's how did sea salt come up here?
Right, so I'm not sure if you saw this, but there was there's an interesting controversy right now in, I mentioned this on Monday night, in Egypt, how they use this new LIDAR, but that's SADIR, as this new satellite technology that allows you to look into penetrating deep under the ground. And they found that under the Giza Plateau, they found these massive columns that are 2,000 feet under the earth, that are really deep. And those columns are in these massive stone boxes that are 250 feet wide on all four sides, right? And they have no idea how anyone from the dynastic Egyptians could have built it. Doesn't make any sense. So the argument is that the Egyptians never built the pyramids. The older pyramids, by the way, are of lower quality. Sorry, the newer pyramids are of lower quality than the older pyramids. And the explanation is that a lot of the things that the Egyptian culture found in Egypt was exactly that. It was just found. They adopted a culture that was there from before, right? And that would have been a pre-flood structure that survived somehow. Okay, how and what? We'll figure it out. They're still doing the research, so it's unclear right now. All right, anyway, let's move on. So we're continuing with the Yalkut Shimoni number 4. He says the contrast between the destruction and fall on the one hand, and the construction and essential stability on the other hand, is a prominent theme for this month, and is revealed through the letter Nun. In the negative aspect, the letter Nun, in the first word, Nefilah, fall. This is why, by the way, if you look at Ashrei, when we say the Ashrei Yosher Yotecha, right? There's no letter Nun in the alphabet that goes down. Each first stance, Aleph, Ashrei Yotecha, each letter, each pasuk starts with the first letter of the alphabet, but the Nun is skipped. We don't want to talk about the Noflim. We don't want to talk about the negative Nun, right, coming down. Therefore, in King David's prayer in Ashrei, which praises God ascending the alphabet, the first letter Nun does not appear. Instead, the next letter takes over and sings Somech Hashem v'kol hanoflim. He hid it in there, right? He puts in there Somech. He lifts up those that fall. God supports those that have fallen. The letter Nun, which is a numerical value of 50, in this context represents the 50 gates of impurity. For this reason, the verse is referring to such a fall which was omitted, and such a fall clearly expressed cannot return of its own accord. Now, this is actually a major machloket. I spoke about this earlier in the morning. We know that when the Jewish people left Egypt, right, the reason why they had their bread, their matzot, were unable to rise is because they had to leave immediately. Why? Had they stayed in Egypt for one more moment, they would have reached the 50th level of Tumah. And if they would have reached the 50th level of Tumah, they would never have the merit of leaving Egypt, and therefore they had to leave immediately, not giving their bread the time to rise. Now, we know there's 50 levels of impurity and there's 50 levels of purity. There's a machloket amongst the debate amongst our sages as to how will the Messiah come. So one opinion says you got to be kulo tov, you got to be all good. Another opinion says you got to be all bad, and you got to get into the 50th level of Tumah. In order for Mashiach comes, if the Jewish people will reach collectively into the 50th level of Tumah, that's when Mashiach will come. Now, what's the question? What's the problem with that? Rabbi, you just told me a moment ago that if the Jewish people in Egypt would have reached the 50th level of Tumah, they would never have been freed. Why can we go into the 50th level of Tumah now? They couldn't do it before. You know what the answer is? They didn't have the Torah. Now that the Torah was given, you have this, you're inoculated, so to speak, and you have a special power that even if you were to be lost in the 50th level of Tumah, you could still be pulled out. Okay? So that's what he's talking about over here. So that's this month. This is a month of duality, the power of to build and the power to destroy. The Arizal says the source of the 50 gates of holiness is the neshama. The letter of neshama is indicated by the nun. Nun is 50. The shama. The shama means her name. Neshama. Right? The neshama, which also may be taken to mean the breath, is bound up with the nose. And that's with the sense of smell, the attribute of the month. As it is written, and he blew into his nostril nishmat chayim, and the man became a living being. At the end of the Shabbat, we make a havdalah, and the conscious separation between sacred and profane, ben kodesh l'chol. During this ritual, we partake in a pleasant smelling spice in order to strengthen the neshama, which just left the blessed realm of the Shabbat, in order to face the week. A sense of smell, which is considered the most spiritual of the sense because the Shema derives its substance directly from it. The sense of smell, directly connected with the soul's intuition, is a faculty by which we precipitate either ultimately victory, or precipitates either ultimate victory, or its opposite. So what's interesting is like this. So the Ben Ish Chai says that when you do Havdalah, the Havdalah ceremony itself is a movement through our actual higher faculties, right? Your higher senses. So the first bracha you make is on the Havdalah candle. That's your eyes. Then you go from your eyes to the Besamim, which is your nose. And then from the Besamim to the nose to the mouth, which is the Geffen, Bori Priya Geffen, right? And the Geffen is connected to this Hamavya ben Kodesh L'chol, the idea of using the mind, the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. You're using your hands to drink, is using all of your senses to be able to get yourself to a cognitive place where you can make a separation between Kodesh L'chol, separating between what we call the holiness of the Sabbath and bringing that holiness with you into the mundane. Now, what's interesting is that when we spent time years ago, maybe we'll do it again sometime soon, go through the story of Adam and Eve in the garden, we know that the 5 senses were used except for the sense of smell. Smell was never tainted with the sin of Adam, and therefore the sense of smell still gives us an ability to reach to higher spiritual planes. So when we're smelling the Besamim, we're not just exercising our power to smell, we're trying to inhale the spirituality of Shabbat and literally bring it with us into the week itself.
And also, Rabbi, the sense of smell, according to the AI technology, is the one that is not touched yet. The AI technology is not.
Yeah, they actually are working on smell and AI technology already. Yeah, they're gonna get there. They're working on it. I just read about it. Yeah, they're working on it. They're working on crazy things. Anyway, they're working on decoding they're working on decoding the language of the animals.
Oh my gosh.
Right? You'll be able to understand what the animals are saying. Imagine having like a little machine on your dog. And he's like, yeah, he starts talking to you. Anyway, so the other thing that I want to mention over here is that, what was it? Smell, Shabbat. I wanted to say something else. I'm forgetting about it right now. Okay, we'll come back to it. B'nai Yisachar number 6 says that associated with this month of Cheshvan and the flood of Noah is the sense of smell. As mentioned in Torah upon Noah's rescue, when he offered up a sacrifice, it said, it was Reach Nichach V'Hashem. God smelled a pleasant fragrance. The smell of smell, so intimately connected with the soul, is revealed to the tribe of the month of Menashe, whose name contains the letter as a neshama and its different arrangement. Now, the word for nun, right? You see this in Alpi Kabbalah. there are 2 days of the year where we're not supposed to wear shoes. The Na'al, right? The Na'al is always, Yom Kippur and Tisha B'Av, is always a symbol in Jewish higher spiritual terms to refer to the body. The body is called a Na'al for the Neshama. The body is a shoe for the soul. So on Tisha B'Av and Yom Kippur, when we take off our shoes, it's not comfortable shoes, it's specifically leather shoes. Where does leather come from? Animal husks. We want to remove the animal husks. You want to remove the animal self and allow yourself to experience a truer expression of your soul on those days. So the idea of not wearing shoes, the nun, the na'al, represents the lowest version of the self. And you're trying to express the greatest version of the self. The letter, number 7, the letter that forms the name Cheshvan are close to those that form the word of Cheshbon, making a clear accounting, whose root is the power of intentional thought formed by the soul, whose resting place is in the mind. It's using your free will, using your ability to make the choice that you need to be the best you. As Shem Shmuel, number 8, says, the element of the month is water, is a clear association with the catastrophic flood. When the water destroyed the world, the heavenly body that influenced Cheshvan is Mars. Mars is the planet of war. It's the red planet associated with the principle of stern judgment. The judgment visited upon the world by the flood occurred as a result of the world's misuse of the power of desire, ta'ava, which is rooted in the element of water. The pollution of the water element brought about the retribution by the element itself. How cool is that? Okay, number 9. He says, continues, he says, the person born under the influence of the sign of Scorpio has an extremely powerful emotional sensitivity and an equally powerful natural inclination. These features, if not used properly, may lead one to the depths of depravity. However, on the positive side, a person with such powerful sensitivities has the ability to penetrate directly to the deepest appreciation of values, and if his or her will is so directed, he or she may achieve a deep understanding of the Torah. The divine service of this month is one's full acceptance of the decrees of heaven as revealed in Torah. This calls for an appreciation of the awesomeness of heaven. Through such contemplative means, symbolized by the letter Nun, pointing to the 50 gates of purity and its opposite, one may be delivered from the evil and destructiveness associated with this month. So how you relate to that power is on you. Number 10, we're going to go to the Midot in a second. Rabbi Menachem of Rimanov says, in the course of Jewish history, there were recurrent decrees by the Jewish host countries during this month that resulted in the confrontation of Jewish property. The cause of these decrees were their revolt on the part of the Jewish people against the sovereignty and the Davidic throne. When many tribes accepted the kingdom of Yeravam and the tribe of Ephraim, during Cheshvan he created a holiday for his constituents in order to lure them away from the pilgrimage to Jerusalem. This will happen in this month, so you have the power to do good, the power to build, the power to destroy, all kind of tethered into the month of Cheshvan. Okay, so we know that the Hebrew month is called Akrab. We know the element is water. We know that the dates for Scorpio are somewhere between the 23rd and the 21st because there are cusp dates there as well. The traits are emotional, passionate, secretive, loyal, and powerful. And those, the emotional and the passionate part is being influenced strongly by the water. This is the ultimate water month. Okay, this is the highest expression of water. So if you're a Scorpio, be mindful that your influence is more by the water sign the elemental sign that is associated with that particular month as well. So personality traits. Generally, they're passionate, loyal, brave. They're very deep and intuitive, emotionally powerful, drawn to truth, and have a lot of depth. The challenge with a Scorpio is that they are generally jealous, they are possessive, they are secretive, holding grudges, vengeful, and controlling behavior. Okay, they may forgive, but unfortunately, they really don't forget. Okay, so this is their emotional and spiritual nature. Scorpios feel deeply but hide their true emotion. They are known for their intensity in both love and anger. They protect their inner world fiercely, very private, often drawn to mysticism, because water is connected to that, psychology and hidden aspects of life. Okay, there's no righteous person on earth who does good and never sins. Everyone has flaws. In relationships, you find that Scorpios are loyal and protective, but they need emotional security before trusting. They struggle with forgiveness and letting go, and can become possessive or controlling. Okay, they love deeply, but don't easily show it. They have a hard time adapting. As parents, they are generally protective and involved, may unintentionally become overbearing, must work on letting go and trusting. That is part of the month itself, because the month has so much destruction in it, it's hard for you to trust. Guiding emotions through the Torah. Vayikra says, do not take revenge or bear a grudge, especially Reuven Scorpions, tendency to hold on to hurt. This is the mitzvah, this is the tikkun of that month. Perkei Avos says, Hu ezu gibor, hakovesh et yotzro, one who is able to control his or her emotions. Okay? Mishlei says as follows, one who is slow to anger is better than a mighty warrior. Same idea, because the emotions we don't want our emotions to define us. We want our intellect to define us. I'm not saying you shouldn't have emotions, but you have to be asking yourself, is this emotion that I'm feeling right now the right emotion to express at this time? Sometimes you wake up feeling sad, that's the wrong emotion. That's not the emotion you want to wake up with, and therefore it's on you to change it. You're not a slave to your emotion. You can push through an emotion and not be directed by the emotion. Okay, Scorpion's tikkun is to learn to forgive, let go of the need for control, trust others, and most importantly, God, channel passion into constructive spiritual growth. You know, I used to be very close to Rabbi Zachariah Wallerstein, and I just was talking to my friend Charlie Harari we were at Shabrachot together, and we're sitting together, we're schmoozing, and I said something like I miss him a little bit. You know, he said something powerful. He said, right, Wallerstein taught him something very deep. I want to share it with you. He taught him that when you're dealing with someone who is struggling with their Judaism, right? Generally, children that struggle with their Judaism or God, right? That struggle is often a reflection of their relation with their parents. And he said that if you're dealing with a boy who's struggling with his relation with God, it's because there's something off with his relationship with his father. And if everything with his relation with his father is okay, and the reason why he's struggling with his relation with God is because he's involved in looking at pornography, right? And there's like and you could test this out. Generally, people that don't believe in God, okay, it's because they have daddy issues. There's a correlation there. Remember that your mazal is connected not only to the time that you were born, but also to your parents. Your parents' mazalot impact this as well. However, he said, very Wallerstein, that if you're dealing with someone who's struggling with mitzvot, they believe in God, right? But they're struggling with mitzvot, right? That's because they have a bad relation with their mothers, right? So, that was easy. Okay, fine. So the idea is that while we need to be mindful of our own struggles and where they come from, remember that you're not a victim to them. Okay, so the practical advice for a Scorpio is learn to express emotions in a healthy way, practice forgiveness and release resentment, embrace spiritual growth and depth, avoid obsession and emotional extremes, use natural intensity for positive leadership and insight. Turn away from the evil and do good, seek peace and pursue it. Last idea, all signs have weaknesses. Scorpio is not worse than the rest. He simply has more intensity, and that intensity, if guided by Torah and wisdom, becomes an incredible power for good. You could do the rest on its own. Scorpio's journey is one of emotional mastery, deep introspection, and spiritual refinement. The Ramban actually died in the month of Cheshvan. His burial. There's actually some interesting people that died in the month of Cheshvan itself. But you have a month that has this powerful negative side to it. And in Judaism, whenever you have the ability to do one thing, you have to have the ability to do the exact opposite. Remember that. In marriage, if you do it right, two people can become so close. And if you get it wrong, so far away. Okay? Your phone can connect you to someone 7,000 miles away in an instant. And at that same moment, when you connect with them, you disconnect yourself from everyone around you. Anything that has the power to do one thing has to have the ability to do the opposite. So the month of Cheshvan is a month of destruction, the bitter month. That means in it you have to find the power to rebuild. Bezrat Hashem, we will continue this conversation next week. Have an amazing week, everybody. Any questions?